I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House.
And this is Devin Caldwell from Our Philly Row.
And we're the hosts of True Tales from Old Houses. Well, here we are, Devin.
Yeah. How are things going with you up there?
Well, what a difference 2 weeks makes, right? 2 weeks ago, we were announcing workshops and such, and now we are absolutely not attending workshops and such.
No. I, for one, am basically staying home.
Right. Well, you have a very good reason to stay home. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for you to go out, especially after you're recovering from cancer surgery.
Yeah, I limit myself. I go to the park across the street with the dog, which has been interesting because the park has been very busy because everybody's at home and then you got to get out and do something. So,
which kind of defeats the purpose, right?
It does, but most people are keeping their distance, and the city put up signs around the park that request people to keep their distance of 6 feet.
Yeah, good. Well, we are healthy and safe here, so that's all I can ask for at this point. Yeah. Neither you nor I am in a position to comment on a global pandemic. I mean, let's be real.
True. Very true.
And that isn't what this podcast is about. But we do hope that we can bring a little bright spot to your week. And also, I want to say, and for Devin too, I guess I'm speaking for you, sorry. But
Go right ahead.
To our healthcare professionals and other essential workers, thank you for doing what you're doing so the rest of us can do what we're supposed to be doing to flatten the curve.
Yeah. I can't express my gratitude for the healthcare people who took care of me during my cancer this last year. And I can only imagine the challenges that they're going through right now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a difficult time.
Yeah.
Today's episode is a special one, and so we are not going to have a listener Q&A, Devin. I mean, you knew that. I knew that. We're the hosts.
Right. Exactly.
Instead, we have nearly a full hour with our friend Scott Sidler from Austin Historical, but you know him best from the Craftsman Blog. About 2 months ago, I asked him if he'd be willing to come on and do a special Q&A session for window restoration, and he was fully on board, which was very exciting. And I got a ton of questions from Instagram, and today it's that episode. It'll be fun to have him here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sorry you were out when we recorded this because I know how much you enjoy spending time with Scott. He's so much fun and so knowledgeable. Just a blast, really. If we could have him on every week, I'd be happy. I'm sure that he could fill the time, too, with many, many topics related to old houses.
Yes, indeed.
Before we launch into our time with Scott, I'm just going to take a really quick moment to say all the ways that you can support True Tales from Old Houses. Not going to take a lot of time. You know the drill. Tell others about the show, share us on social media, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And finally, if you feel like True Tales from Old Houses brings value to your life in some way, entertainment, education, please consider making a recurring or one-time donation over on truetalesfromoldhouses.com. Things are really tricky for everyone right now, and none of this is expected. Devin and I are here to bring joy, information, and stories no matter what. So thank you.
I'm Scott Sidler. I am the owner of Austin Historical down here in Orlando, Florida, and I run the craftsmanblog.com.
Excellent. I am thrilled to have you back, Scott. So thank you so much for doing this twice, putting up with this twice.
God, I'm excited too. I had so much fun last time. I figured when you offered, I was like, that would be wonderful. I'd love to.
Oh, that's great. Well, it was a total blast. Devin and I loved having you the first time around. We had some sound difficulties, which made it a little sad. So I was very happy to get you back. We have better sound. We are better overall at doing podcasts. And this is a special episode this season. For people who are unfamiliar, on my blog, blakehillhouse.com, I have declared it, I don't know why I did this, I declared it the year of the window. And the idea behind the year of the window is that there is so much window work to do, and if I don't focus my DIY efforts on these windows, then I can theoretically string this project out until I die.
There's a lot of windows on each house, and it does take a long time, especially when you have a full-time job doing other things.
Yes, exactly. The idea was, I thought, well, wouldn't it be a lot more fun if I had a whole bunch of people all joining in and doing the same thing, and we could help each other and we could motivate each other and share tips and tricks. And it kind of took off. So there's a crowd, a small crowd of people doing the Year of the Window. There's a hashtag on Instagram. And I thought, what better way to get all of our questions answered than by having someone like you, someone who's professional historic restoration, does a lot of windows. I asked on Instagram, I said, who has questions? Well, I got like 50 questions.
I saw that. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was a little overwhelming. I thought, well, let's see. I don't really have Scott for a half a day. I just have him for an hour at most. But I thought we would do this just for funsies, because we haven't ever done this before, in sort of a game show format.
Love it.
Okay, I thought you'd be on board. I thought you'd be on board. All right, I've separated all the questions. They're kind of similar, but there's enough different ones. So we're going to have a round one, which is sort of like more general basic questions. And then we're going to do round two. Things get a little more complicated, maybe.
Is that double the points?
Yeah, double the points, exactly.
Excellent.
And then at the end, there will be a lightning round.
Yes, I like lightning rounds.
Okay,
Perfect.
good. So I thought, Scott's going to wonder, what is the prize, right? First, I would ask you how you feel about participation trophies.
Oh, don't get me started on participation trophies.
I had a feeling. Okay, we won't do that. We won't do that.
I'm of the wrong generation to appreciate participation trophies.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, I am also the wrong generation to to be on board with participation trophies. But that's okay. I do have these awesome True Tales from Old Houses
Very
coffee
nice.
mug. So I will happily send you one for doing this. But I'm also going to randomly pick one of the people who submitted one of these questions and send them a mug.
Perfect.
I thought that would be fun.
That would be great.
I believe that you are going to know all the answers, but there's no penalty if you don't know the answers.
There's plenty of stuff I don't know, so I will do my best, and if I feel confident, I'll answer, and if not, I will let you know that I'm guessing.
Okay, sounds good. I bet your guess will at least head us in the right direction. I have no doubt about
Hopefully.
it. Yes. Okay, for round one, you can, when you choose a category, you can either run the category, or if you get tired of answering questions about that category, we can switch, and then you can come back.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. I like the option for the variety.
Yes,
right.
yeah, because we might get tired of talking about one thing. Some of these categories have quite a few questions. All right, so your categories for round one are lead paint, unpainted windows, unusual window situations, supplies, and newcomers.
Let's see. I think I like newcomers. Let's start with newcomers.
Okay.
For 100?
For 100. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, points don't matter. Let's go. What's the best thing a first-timer can do to prep for restoring windows in their house?
That is an awesome question. I like that a lot, because somebody's like, okay, I don't want to start if I'm going the wrong way. So right. I think education. I think if you can read some of the posts on my site, John Leake's site, Historic Homeworks, anybody, Wood Window Makeover, Steve Quillian, anybody who's posting on how to restore windows, go read some of these posts to get a start, so you have a sense of what you're going to be needing to either buy, what you're going to be needing to do, how to prep it, all the safety concerns. Just get a quick base of knowledge. And you can do that with reading 2 or 3 posts on window restoration. Just start there, and then that'll help you determine where you need to go further on, kind of understanding what's going on in your house or your situation.
Excellent. Would you like to continue with that category for 200 points?
Yeah, let's do the next one.
This person says, I don't know what happened. 3 of 4 panes broke so far on my first window. Tips and tricks for removing glass without breaking it. Now, I don't have any background on this. I suspect I know how this person tried to take the window panes out, but I don't have background. So what would you say?
Right. So I would say, welcome to window restoration.
Yeah.
I'm infamous around my shop for breaking glass. I am bad at it. It's just tough sometimes. There's a lot of variables, like, are you using steam or infrared heat? Are you just trying to dry scrape and chip out the putty? Sometimes you get windows that have what we call lovingly cement putty. Mm-hmm. It's just so hard. It's actually had some either Portland cement or different things mixed in with it. So it doesn't respond to any of the heat methods that we use. So I would say if you're 2 things, if you're breaking 3 out of the 4 panes, then either you're going too fast or too aggressive with it, or you're not using some way to soften up the putty, which is a great way. Heat guns like the speed heaters, the infrared are great, or steam. Some of those things can really help you to do it. If you break the glass, it's not the end of the world. You can replace glass. It is readily available. I know it's hard to find that wavy glass, but I would say to start, slow down, take your time, and look for those glazing points. A lot of people don't know how many there are, and sometimes there was a mean glazer who put in a bunch, and you're just trying to get that glass out, and there's a bunch of little tiny diamond points all around it. So just take your time, and you'll break less if you go slower.
And for heat, I also could add that you want to kind of bounce those rays back. So if you're using infrared, a nice little piece of, I use a foil covered pizza box, super low tech, but to keep it off the glass.
I bought like a little box of step flashing years ago, and we just put that on the glass, and it's thick enough aluminum, and it just reflects it right back and saves us the trouble. Because if you heat that glass too long, it's gonna, especially in the winter, I've noticed when it's super cold out and you turn that heat on, the glass is cracking right away.
Right. Would you like to continue with that category or switch categories?
I would like to move to unusual window situations. That's intriguing.
I should preface this by saying that although they aren't particularly unusual, it's just that they're not related to strictly sash windows, which a lot of these questions are. So unusual window situations for 100. I guess we're back to 100 points.
Yes, we'll start at the beginning.
All right. You're allowed to go for the 200-point question. But all right. Okay. So the 100-point question is advice on circa 1852 windows that do not have weights. They just have spring pins to keep them up.
Yes, we use spring bolts a lot. There are a lot of other options. There are thumb latches. There's a ton of different balance systems from the mid-1800s and back that people were using that are very varied depending on the region. They function very much just like a double hung window, or it could be perhaps a single hung window where the bottom sash just has the spring bolts. I don't find that I have a lot of trouble with those spring bolts. So you pull the bolts in, they may be painted and caulked in place. And just like anything, it's cutting it free, making sure they're operating properly, and cleaned up of all the stuff that builds up on these windows. And once you do, there should be holes in the jambs, and sometimes it has maybe just one hole where the bolts go into, and that's what keeps it locked. And then there's one up at the top that holds it in place when it's open. Sometimes those holes have been filled in with caulk or wood filler, and it's not really functioning. So you can drill the holes wherever you want, that you have little spots that you want the window sash to stop at. We usually do smart. Like one where it's locked, one in the middle, and one all the way open. And it's usually that way for the top and bottom sash if it's double hung, or sometimes just the bottom sash. So those spring bolts are still available. SRS Hardware sells them in a variety of different finishes. So if yours are broken or missing, it's a really simple balance system, and it works pretty darn good.
Great. All right, excellent. I'm going to link a lot of this stuff. I'm kind of taking notes as you're talking. So in our show notes for this episode, we're going to do both transcripts so everybody can read these questions and answers. And I'm also going to link to all of these things that you're mentioning. If you're out there listening to this podcast, it will be available for you, I promise. Same category or a new category?
I want to do the same category, but I want to jump up to the 500 range. I want to something really, really unusual and difficult.
Wow, I wish I had a $500 question for you. I'm looking at my other sections to see if I can. Wait, okay, let me find one. Okay, here's the $500 question. You ready?
Okay.
Any suggestions about how to match old frosted glass? The new options look different.
Oh, okay, that is a tough one. There's a ton of glass options out there. The patterns have some of the names. There are things like Florex glass that 75 years ago, it was one pattern, and now it's just slightly different, just like our baseboards are slightly thinner than they used to be. So things have changed a bit. But I would say the best resource that I do is I'll go to like one of the small glass suppliers or an art glass place. We have one of those here in Orlando that they have access to anything and everything and show them the glass you want to match. And they're usually pretty good at getting as close as possible, or they may know that, oh, that's pattern 123. Like they have numbers and names, and they may be able to discern it. But you just trying to look for, if you Google frosted glass, there's like a bazillion different types, and it's so hard to find. So take it to a pro. If you have a art glass or a stained glass place there, or even just a regular glass supplier, they may know what pattern that is and be able to get you a match that's as close as possible today.
Wow, I wouldn't have even thought of that. They're like China patterns almost or something, right? Like
yeah, they really are.
Identify that, sure.
Yeah, because it's usually not like this one town had this one random piece of glass. No, it was a standard that was out there at that time, and somebody was making it, and it may or may not be available anymore, but they'll know what pattern replaced it or was closest to it.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Same category or new category?
Let's do lead paint.
Lead paint. Okay. And I will just tell you right up front that there are only 2 questions here, $200 questions.
That's fine. We'll just spend one on lead paint because it gets a lot of attention anyway.
It really does. Actually, for lead paint too, I'm just going to say that we did the first season of True Tales from Old Houses. We actually hit, I think, 2, maybe even 3 episodes where we talked about lead paint, working with lead paint and children's. I will link those episodes in the show notes, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on this in round 1. Even though it's a common question, it's a readily available answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there.
Right. So I'm going to ask you one that is a little bit more of a gray area, and that is, can I strip lead paint safely with a lower setting on my heat gun?
That's a really good question. So lead paint or lead vaporizes at somewhere around 1,000 degrees, so 900 maybe on the low side. But I would always try and err on the side of safety. So if I say, okay, let's cut it off at 800 just to be safe, because after it vaporizes, it doesn't do any good. Your mask doesn't even do any good. So you need to. It's a different type of organic vapors mask that you would need. So I think that if you have a heat gun that has a variable temperature control, and you can verify with, say, like one of those thermal imaging cameras, you can verify that the surface is not heating beyond a temperature exactly, then you should be safe if you keep it below that temperature. Now, I have seen a heat gun set at like 600 degrees, and if you leave it on the surface for a long time, I've seen that surface heat up above 600 degrees. I didn't check to know if it was going to 900 or 1,000 or something like that, but it's all about what temperature is the paint.
Right.
And so I think if you're using a heat gun and it's on a lower setting and it's working, you should be okay as long as you can verify that that surface is not getting above 1,000 degrees or 900 degrees, somewhere in there.
Is there a mask that you can wear that will protect you against vaporized lead paint? You said a mask won't even help you. Is there something that you could wear?
The masks that you're supposed to use are the P100 cartridges for masks, and those are what help you against particulates. I don't know that you've stumped me on this one. So I know that there is also an organic vapors cartridge you can use on a mask, and that's meant to protect you from things like if you're spraying oil-based paints or any of these like paint thinner and xylene, all these carriers for some of these tougher industrial paints. It's supposed to protect you from those fumes, and I don't know if that would protect you since it is meant for smaller things. But that's a very good question.
Yeah, it's worth exploring. I think for the common person who isn't willing to do a ton of research, it may not be super safe for them to be heating up their lead paint at a low setting because it's a little unknown.
And I know where I would assume where the question's coming from is the infrared guns are very expensive.
Right.
And if you're doing a lot of windows, it makes sense. But if you're just going to do 1 or 2 windows, to spend $400 or $500 on one of those guns is a lot when you can get a $60 heat gun at the store.
Right.
But you can take that chance. But if you can, you also need the thermal camera or a thermometer, some way to verify what the temperature is. But if you can keep the temperature, as long as you keep it low enough, then you shouldn't have a problem with it.
All right. Next category.
Let's jump over to supplies.
Supplies. Okay. This person says, glazing brand recommendations, looking for maximum longevity. I'm familiar with the brand that's going around for the most part. People are talking about the brand of glazing, but I know that you have your own brand now.
I do.
I'd like to hear about your brand. Sarco is the one we usually talk about that I see floating around, but you have Austin's. Tell us about Austin's.
Well, it's actually very similar because I've been a Sarco fan for years. So their Type M multi-glaze and their dual glaze is great. They have different uses we won't get into that, but there are different applications for when you want to use those. I was working with them for years on a glazing putty that was more resistant to mildew because I'm down here in Florida where everything mildews, caulk, putty, every paint even just it mildews constantly. So I wanted something that had a little bit more protection.
Sure.
So we were experimenting down here by adding things into the glazing putty. We would usually use Type M, and we'd put some other additives in and mess with it. But I'm mixing glazing putty like on a 1 gallon at a time thing, and they're much better at knowing the formulations and doing a big batch of it so it's all consistent.
Sure.
And so we talked with them, and I said, I would like very much if you guys could help me develop this putty for use in more warm, humid climates.
Right.
And so the result was Austin's Glazer's Putty, which is made by Sarco. They're awesome manufacturers, great partners, and they make it for us specifically to resist mildew. So we've added some things like zinc oxide and some other mildew inhibitors in there. Anything that's got linseed oil in it is not mildew proof.
Right.
But I've done a lot of tests down here on a lot of houses, even just in my own backyard, putting chunks of the putty out there, and it seems to mildew much less and stand up longer than other putties down here because of the amount of humidity and warmth we have.
Excellent.
That's where that came from. So yeah, in terms of longevity, I would always stay away from DAP. There's a great saying about DAP that's kind of crass, and I'll keep away from it so people can look it up and find it.
Okay.
DAP is, it goes with DAP is, and it rhymes with DAP.
And it rhymes with DAP. Okay, we gotcha.
I have a post on the blog, I think it's called Which Glazing Putty is Right for You, where I did maybe 6 or so different glazing putties that are readily available and tried them out and kind of gave my thoughts on how they held up, how they glazed. There's a lot of stuff out there, but to me, Sarco was the way to go.
Or Austin's in this case, right?
Exactly. Well, one and the same, right?
Yeah.
Private labeled through them, and they make really good stuff, and they're good people. So I like family-owned businesses, and they are definitely that.
Well, that's great. And I'm looking forward to trying it because we do have some mildew situations here in my part of the country, believe it or not. Even though it is 3 degrees today, we have the absolute opposite summer.
Well, I will send you a quart and you can try it out and let me know what you think.
Oh my gosh, I'd love it. I've got a ton to glaze. So yeah, I'll be all over that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see, we're still going along here. So you haven't chosen anything yet from Unpainted Windows.
Let's go there. Let's try unpainted windows.
Okay. This was actually a question, and I have zero experience with unpainted windows because all of my windows are painted. I didn't know how to answer these, so these are perfect for you. But the $100 question or the $200 question?
Let's start at the bottom, 100, because we don't have a lot of unpainted windows down here either.
Okay. All right.
So.
It says, our windows are unpainted. How do I remove polyurethane, I assume, and what do I use on the wood after that?
All right. So unpainted windows, I'm assuming the interior of your windows, that means is like a varnish or a polyurethane of some sort. You don't need a heat gun for it. I find that the best way to remove old finish like shellac, polyurethane varnish, anything like that is just sanding. So some light sanding, like 80, if you start with like an 80 grit, move up to 120 grit, you'll get down to, you have to make sure you get to clean wood. It's not quite as easy as paint where you can just paint right over it. Because if you're going to stain them, then the stain's only going to take in where the wood is bare, and you may not notice it until you stain it and you're like, oops, it's not right. So You have to be really thorough with your sanding on there. And then I prefer, once it's sanded and if you've done your stain, to seal them with spar urethane, spar varnish. It's meant for exterior use, even though it's on the interior. It has UV inhibitors in it. It's more flexible than regular polyurethane. And so those windows expand and contract a lot. So the spar varnish can hold up to that, what is basically an exterior element with the amount of sunlight it gets and the amount of heat and cold that it gets. So that's, 3 coats of spar varnish of some sort is really a great way for the inside.
Great. Yeah, I use spar on door thresholds a lot around here, and it holds up like crazy.
Yeah, because I've noticed if you put regular polyurethane, it'll crack much faster. The spar has a lot more flexibility and UV resistance, so that's the advantage of it. All right. It does have a little dark tint to it that people may not notice. It's not perfectly clear like regular polyurethane, so that's something to notice, that it may darken it a little bit for you. So before you stain it a dark color, know that the spar has a darkness to it. I'm not sure why.
Okay. All right. Let's go. I'm going to make an executive decision. Let's go to the $200 question on that one.
Okay, let's go.
Glazing stained windows. I think a lot of people have the question about coloring it. Should you color it? Don't color the glaze because it's white or, subtly off white, but mostly white. What's your take?
There are some different kind of powdered pigments like earth pigments and things you can mix into the putty. I have also had good luck, just since it's an oil-based putty, and I don't know if Sarco recommends this or not, but I have had good luck just adding simple Minwax stains to their oil-based stains to my oil-based putty. And I can mix it up and make darker shades of it so that when you're glazing your windows and backbedding it, you don't notice the lighter putty up against the dark wood. Right. So that's worked well. I recommend adding the stain, mixing it up on the table and adding it rather than trying to stain the putty once it's in, because it just takes it up a little bit differently. You can mess with the color a little bit better. If you wait till after the putty's skinned, then it won't take the stain in very well at all. So just mix them up on like some wax paper and try and get it to a closer color, and you'll hide a lot better.
Great. Okay. I have a little bit left over in category called supplies and newcomers.
Let's do another newcomers.
All right. It says, what can we do to help our windows without taking them out to work on them?
The first windows I worked on were mine, and I had no idea how to get them out. So I just got on a ladder. Luckily, my house is just a one-story. But I just got on a ladder and worked on them. I chipped out the glazing putty. I scraped off some loose paint. I put new putty in, sanded it, spot primed it, and painted it. And they held up about 10 years before they needed any love from me again. So that's a great way to do it. We call that in situ repairs. So you just do it where it is. If you don't want to mess with pulling it out and boarding it up, that's a easy fix to do. And it's less intimidating, I think, too, because you don't have to mess with the mechanicals. You don't have to really open up that whole can of worms.
Right, especially if you're not ready, because that is, once you've got it all out, you think, oh, great, now I have this really large project to finish and get it all back in there.
Yeah, and you have to get it back in. Otherwise, you've got a boarded up crack house, what it looks like. You're like, what happened?
They must be moving, right?
Right.
All right. Oh, pulleys. What do you think about pulleys? Do you oil pulleys?
I'm very pro pulley.
Yeah,
I think pulleys are great. Yeah.
Not anti-pulley in any way. Excellent.
No. Screw-in pulleys, I like to pull out and restore them like on a wire wheel or something like that. The press fit pulleys, just leave them in place, kind of clean them up a bit. Little WD-40. If the wheels are bent, you can usually use kind of a flathead pliers and bend the wheels back to make sure that they're able to turn. They get bent up pretty bad. So just really a little WD-40 and working on them, that you can usually get them running again unless they're really frozen up.
Okay.
Once you get rid of the caulk and everything, sometimes the rope will just simply slide on the wheel without the pulley turning. If you really are intimidated and you don't want to get into it and really work on it, it is an option.
And to wrap up round one, the last question is, in supplies, using homeowner DIY supplies, what's the best way to remove stubborn, brittle glaze?
Stubborn, brittle glaze is really okay. I'm assuming they mean from like, I'm setting this sash down and I'm going to deglaze it. I'm going to take that out really carefully with a chisel.
Yeah.
If you get a chisel and a hammer and you just kind of work out that, depends how brittle your glaze is. If it's loose, you can come at it with a chisel right along the glass or right along the wood. You got to be careful not to gouge the wood, but that's the simplest tool you can use for it. Mm-hmm. You just have to be careful.
Okay. I guess now I would probably put a commercial or something in, right, before we start for round two.
Just a word from our sponsor.
Yeah, a word from our sponsor, which is me again. So, yeah. Those were your round one questions. Now, round two questions, I kind of grouped these. Maybe they're a little bit harder, or they'd be for someone who's already done a bit of this work. Maybe not, but they're just trying to figure out the next steps. Your categories for round two, if you're ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
What would Scott do, or WWSD? Everything old is new again. I'll explain that one to you when you get it.
Okay.
Storm windows, gross black stuff.
Right.
And the last category is pro level achievement unlocked.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the fun stuff, the gross black stuff. I want to know what that is.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. This is the question. Wood windows getting mildewy inside. Is this a window problem or a house problem?
That's a good question. It could be one or both.
Right.
It really just depends. So if they're getting mildew on the inside, then that means they're getting moisture on the inside of them. So what causes moisture on the inside and condensation on the inside of your windows is sometimes just higher humidity levels inside. So it may be a air conditioner that is, it's in those in-between seasons, it's a little tough when your heater's not running all the time, your AC is not running all the time. The humidity gets up a little higher. I would try a dehumidifier or running your AC or heater a little bit more, changing, turning the setting up a bit or down a bit. some of that, it's just tough. It's using a bath fan, I've noticed, is a huge thing that some people will be like, a lot of these old houses have a bathroom without a bath fan.
Right.
If you can use an exhaust fan in the kitchen and in the bathroom, that keeps your humidity levels down. And when you keep the humidity levels down, you get less condensation on your windows.
Mm-hmm.
A single pane window is going to condense somewhat when you get a cold snap outside, but it's, the condensation happens on the outside at a different time of year. But when you get a cold snap and it's humid inside,
Right.
it's going to happen unless you find a way to get that humidity down.
Right, exactly. All right. Do you want the other question in gross black stuff? Because I think this might be a question we have to answer together, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. But the next question is, it's about condensation again, and it's, well, all right, I guess it's kind of the same question. So maybe this is, rather than a question, it's just an explanation too. I happen to know the person that submitted this question, and she lives in my town. And as I said, outside today is 3 degrees. Inside our house is probably, she has little ones, so probably, I'd say she keeps it a good 60. Some of the rooms in my house are 70. So I discovered that she also doesn't have storm windows. So basically she has her sash window. So my thought was that it's kind of like a glass of iced tea. You have your iced tea inside your glass, and then you get condensation on the outside. So reverse that. Picture that in reverse. Your iced tea is your outside temperature. And then I suggested that storm windows, which maybe that's a new category too, but those would be helpful to her to cut down on that, on the temperature variance directly from outside to inside. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because you get anything you can do to keep, so the window glass, so say you've got a window without a storm window. You've got just that one pane of glass, and inside it's 65 and outside it's 3. It's always going to condense. Where is the dew point? I don't know what the dew point would be there. It's going to be based on the temperature and the humidity in the house, but it's going to, and it's not just your windows. This is happening inside your walls too. Right. So this is why some of these houses you get some rot or some mold issues, because the moisture inside the house is trying to go from warm to cool, and it's going to pass through the dew point at some point, because there's a dew point that's somewhere above 3 degrees. Right. So somewhere in the wall and on the window, it's just apparent. So it's going to condense. Sure. So the best way you can do it is to warm up that window surface. So maybe if you have a storm window outside, or use an interior storm window, something that is adding a buffering there, that glass is not going to be quite as cold. And so maybe you're going to get it raised up to the temperature where maybe the glass is now only 40 degrees. And maybe the dew point, because you've kept the humidity low enough, the dew point's 45, so it's not condensing now. Right. So it's all about warming up that glass. And that's the whole theory behind insulated glass, double and triple pane glass, where it's just keeping the inner portion warmer or more commensurate with what you have inside, so that you don't get the condensation. Right. Okay. And I grouped that with gross black stuff, because gross black stuff always follows interior window condensation. It does. Yeah. As does peeling paint. You get that moisture on there. Meeting rails and muntins all start peeling paint when they've got a lot of water on them. All right, so you ran that category. Good job. All right. What's the next category you would like? I can repeat them to you if you. No, I've got them. Let's see. Let's do, what would Scott do? What would Scott do? Would a steam box be worth the investment to build? I have 40 windows. Oh my goodness. Yes, if you're doing 40 windows, I think it's totally worth it. So say you've got my steam box, I think the Jiffy steamer I used for it the first time was $250. And the materials for it, the insulation and 1x4s and things, was like another $120. The cost to restore maybe a 1/1 window or so is going to be $1,100, $1,200, $1,400, somewhere in there. It's like, it can get expensive. So you're going to save a ton if you go spend $500 on a steam box. Okay. And you don't fight yourself trying to chip out all that glazing putty. Sure. Now, I don't know. Maybe they have a house where the glazing putty is like falling out of the windows. And if that's the case, maybe not. You don't need a steam box. If the paint's already missing and the putty's already gone, you're probably okay. But if you've got a lot of paint and putty on there, I would definitely build the steam box. Have you written a blog post about how to build a steam box? I have not written a post about it. I used Dave Bowers at Old Window Restore. That would be Oldie, O-L-D-E. Window Restore has plans that you can download, I think for like $20, right, on how to build a window steam box. And I bought those years ago, built mine based on it, made some slight modifications. You can make any size you want. It's great. And then when you're done with your windows, you can sell it to your neighbor, right? Because they're going to want to do their windows, and you make your investment back. Oh, that sounds like a fine idea. Same category, or would you like to switch?
Let's do that one again. That was fun.
All right. This is probably one of the most common types of questions. I get this all the time, and so I'm going to ask it to you because I've answered it a bunch. I'm going to ask you. If you start to restore the window or sash or trim, when do you know it's too far gone?
Well, I think it's a personal thing. It just depends on you and what your abilities are. It's like if you're just this ace carpenter, then maybe it's never too far gone.
Right.
Or if you're just a very beginning DIYer, then you're like, I need to call somebody who's got some extra skills. At my company, we go by the Secretary of Interior standards. If it's more than a third destroyed, then we usually will rebuild an element. It doesn't make sense to spend $100 in epoxy and 5 hours sculpting it to work when you could just rebuild something very simply. So, if you want to use the Secretary of the Interior's standards, 33% means it's too far gone. But it depends on your skill level.
Right. All right. Excellent. That's a great reference to Secretary of Interior. They have the standards for historical restoration for a variety of types of properties in the national park system. That's where they get those.
Yeah, and they give you all kinds of, under that category of what would Scott do is like, that's what I'm like looking at going, what should we do? Well, we should follow what they say because they've got the best and smartest people that have put together those standards for how you should treat these things. When should you replace? When should you repair? How should you repair? What kind of materials? It's a immensely valuable guide, and it's all online.
Yeah, and as a National Park Service, a child who was a National Park Service, I was a National Park Service brat, I can tell you that they have researched that ad nauseum. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they didn't just throw some stuff together and be like, let's see if this helps. There are really talented people who work to put that together.
They have thought of every contingency.
Mm-hmm.
All right, which category next?
Let's go with everything old is new again.
Okay. This category, I also get a lot of these questions, and they are definitely out of my skill set, but I'll ask you. It's mostly about tearing out vinyl windows where there used to be sash windows, but then they were replaced, and they want to take those vinyls out and put their sash windows back. Okay, so that's the idea. That. All right. So these questions are related to that. So here's the first one. When replacing with salvaged windows, can the squareness be adjusted for my house's different angles? And I assume this question means if you get a salvage sash and your frame is not square, can you adjust that sash in some way?
Yes, absolutely. Some of it, again, depends on your carpentry skills because it is a carpentry type skill. But we have done, I'll say this, for example, we did some windows on the turret of a house over in Rockledge, Florida. And the turret was sagging so badly that one side, the bottom rail on one sash was like 3 inches tall, and on the other side was about 7 inches. Oh. So we built. They didn't have the money to do all. They had stopped the sagging, but they didn't have the money to jack it back up and try and revise it. So we built onto the bottom of the sash a big wedge.
Right.
Glued it, doweled it, attached it properly onto there, and then filled it and sanded it. Once it was sanded and painted and everything, you never noticed that there was a Dutchman on there.
Right.
And you can make it match. Now, if it's off a little bit, you can sometimes like take the glass out of a window and rack the window a bit to fit your opening, and then kind of peg it again, like nail the joints again and leave it in that position. That's a good way to do it. But if it's really off, you just have to do a Dutchman and add onto the sash to make it fit in that opening. And certainly we do that a lot, because if you have a perfectly square sash and you put it back in that awkward opening, it just nothing lines up. It's not energy efficient, and it's terribly annoying.
Over on my IGTV channel, actually, I just did a short video about how to take a sash apart. You were talking about taking it apart, racking it, repinning it, same thing, or repegging it rather. So I do have a short video on IGTV about that. Recently did that myself, as a matter of fact. Okay, would you like to stick with that category or move on?
Let's go to storm windows.
Storm windows.
Yes.
Is making storm windows feasible anymore? Advice.
I absolutely think it is feasible. So probably 2 of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel are DIY storm windows and DIY interior storm windows. Because I made the storm windows video, and then everybody's like, well, how do you do them for the interior? And I was like, you know what? This is even easier than the exterior. So let me show you. And it's very, very simple. I mean, it's just wood, whatever your skill level is. If you want to do pocket hole jigs or dowels, or if you want to get fancy and do mortise and tenon joinery, you just build a wood frame, essentially a picture frame, and route it out or glaze it however you want. If it's interior, you can glaze it with acrylic or even I've seen people run just thin plastic over it and tighten it up. There's those, I think like Frost King makes them. They're the window kits that you can put plastic and use a hair dryer. You can put that onto a wood frame.
Sure.
Yeah, so you can do that on an interior storm frame, and do that. And the cost to build an exterior or an interior storm window out of wood and glass is $120, something like that, for glass and supplies in your time. It's really the energy savings are like way improved from there. So
that Frost King just brought me back to my childhood, because speaking of National Park Service, we lived in a government house in the national parks, and so I remember seasonally putting up the plastic on the outside of the windows with the wood frames. I hadn't thought about that for years until you just said that. That's funny.
It's great. I mean, those packages are like, I don't know, $7 a window, and it really makes a huge difference. People are like, oh, but I can't open the windows. Like, it's plastic. If the house is on fire, you can just tear that down. And it's not like you're going to open your windows during the winter, so it's not a problem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Same category or new one?
Let's go back to let's talk more vinyl, so that everything old is new again.
Everything old is new again. Okay. When I read this question, I just feel overwhelmed. That's why the deep sigh. But here's the question: the easiest way to remove vinyl windows and take them back to original sashes. Would I need to do anything to the frames to fit wooden sashes back in?
Man, that so depends on what they did. So replacement windows come in two general camps. One are what's called pocket replacements, where they just took your old sashes out and they likely like hammered your pulleys in or got rid of them, and then they put a new window into the old jamb. If that's the case, you basically just have to cut all the caulk out, remove the screws or whatever fasteners they put to put that replacement in, tear it out, and then you've got your old window jamb. And you have to build sash or a fine salvage sash to fit that. You'll have to do some repairs here and there to repair the damage they did, and maybe put new pulleys in. That's the best case scenario. Pocket replacements are so easy to replace, and that's the most common too, which is nice. The other option is when somebody really went, whole hog and tore out the whole frame and everything. That's way more complicated and usually requires permitting and engineering to build a new wood window frame and new wood sash. We do that for people often because they hate, they just replaced 2 windows here and I need to get everything consistent. So it's totally doable. Like Steve Quillian over at Wood Window Makeover will make sash and jams and everything and ship them to you. Same thing with the folks over at Wood Window Rescue in Oklahoma. They'll ship you out sash that are made with jams if you need to. So you can get them done. You're probably going to need like a contractor, or you need to be really handy in order to get the right measurements and trim that whole thing out if it's not a pocket replacement.
Right.
But you just cross your fingers, it's a pocket replacement.
Yeah, thus my deep sigh. And I will say that oftentimes here, when they do vinyl replacements, they actually fill the entire pocket cavity with spray foam.
Spray foam, yeah.
So where all your window weight pockets are just going to be completely filled with spray foam. That is another dilemma.
Yeah, and there are some ways around that. We did a quote for a customer that wanted to have that had happened. They had filled it with spray foam, and it was going to be time consuming to take everything out, and they had removed the pulleys, and actually they'd filled the holes where the pulleys were. And so we said, well, it's already filled. Why don't we do a little repair, and we'll modify your sash to be spring bolts like we were talking about earlier.
Oh, smart.
And I'd rather have the spray foam out, but if you it's not in your budget or time, then you can just leave it for right now and put spring bolts in, and you don't have to mess with it.
That is brilliant. That is something that never would have occurred to me, but that is so brilliant. That's all right. Excellent. That I was trying to figure out. I thought, why or how in the world would anybody just try to get all that spray foam? It would just be a nightmare. It would be a nightmare. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes it's like pulling the thread on a sweater doing window restoration, and you have to really determine if you want to pull that thread, if the sweater bugs you that much.
Right.
Because you may have to redo the whole thing, and I would usually rather be like, it's not perfect, but this is much better than what I had. So baby steps.
Right. Okay. Well, you ran that category. Good job. We still have more in What Would Scott Do? WWSD.
Let's go for it.
We also have Pro Level Achievement Unlocked.
Is that one unlocked?
No, you haven't.
Or do I have to unlock it?
You have to unlock it, yeah.
What do I have to accomplish in order to unlock the Pro Level Achievement?
Well, there are 5 questions in Pro Level Achievement Unlocked.
Okay, let's get into there so we can start doing some of this here.
Okay. Pulley or weight windows. How do I reseal or adjust the warping of the frames? And you know what? Now that I just saw this question, I thought it was something different. I was thinking of window frames, but I'm wondering if this question was actually related to sash frames, which we already addressed.
Let's assume that it is. And I would say I mentioned this earlier, but I want to make sure they know you really won't have much luck moving them if the glass is in.
Okay.
You have to deglaze it because the glass kind of acts like a squaring effect on it. So, and you may have to trim your glass or get new glass if you put it that far out of place.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you don't know that your window's even rotten until you take the glass out because the glass was holding the whole thing together.
Right.
So let's go to the $200 question we'll see if we can unlock this whole level. Ready?
Yep.
This one is a business question, but I think it would pertain well to someone who has a lot of windows to do. How does a business streamline such a tedious process? Quality, speed, so I guess order of operations is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the order of operations is huge on that stuff. So for us, I mean, it's constant training for people that work for me. It's just, there's a lot of elements. It seems like, all you do is windows. You're like, yeah, but there's just so many factors and variables to deal with and potential problems that can come up. So we take everything through the same process. When we pull the window out, we cut our plywood because we have to board up here. There's no storm windows down here, so we have to board up. We cut that right away. We scrape all the paint off. We just have this process, and I've outlined it in my book, Old Windows Made Easy and Old Windows in Depth, that we just follow through that process. And we do all the site work, get our jambs and frames painted, board it up, and we leave it alone, and then we go back and work on our sashes. For us, that makes sense because I want the paint to cure as long as I can before the sash is ready to go back in so it doesn't glue itself shut.
Smart.
And then we'll come back in, we'll do all our sash work. You got to think about like glazing time, drying times, and if I get these sash stripped, deglazed and stripped, and then glazed again, repaired and glazed, then it's going to sit for a few days while it cures. I'm going to move over to the next one. So you're not wasting time, because otherwise you will just sit and wait for a few days.
Really, literally waiting for paint to dry.
Literally waiting for paint to dry. Yes. And so it's kind of tough on that side, but following that order of operations in the book is huge, because then you don't have to go back and do something twice.
Right. The $300 question. You're getting close here. All right.
We're going to make a ton of money here. This is great.
The top sash is loose. What do I use to tighten the exterior stop? Now, I do know that the person who asked this question, hers is a salvaged window, so I would guess that the thickness of the sash was slightly smaller than the original window. But if that were not the case, what if you installed it or maybe took out some old weather stripping, put in a different kind, and now the sashes lock together, but they also rock back and forth between the stop pieces? What do you think?
So there's not a movable stop on for the top sash. You just have your parting bead and you have your blind stop, which are fixed in place, and they can't be moved. They go in their place. They go where they go. We've done in a place like that. Most residential windows are 1 3/8 inches thick. Maybe you've sanded it too much and it goes to 1 1/4, and now it kind of flops in and out. What you can do there is not a great solution, but you can add I prefer to do it on the inside of the blind stop, or on the outside face of the top sash. You add like a scab onto it, a piece of wood that helps it to not float back and forth. If you add it to the inside, it's going to create a gap between the top and bottom sash when they lock. So you have to add it to the outside. So, if you scraped it down, the blind stop doesn't have a lot of paint on it, then you can just add that, I don't know, whatever you need, 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch there, and kind of nail it on, do a pneumatic nailer onto the back side of it, prime it, paint it, and you should get a little bit smoother operation. But sadly, you can't move the blind stop or the parting bead. And that's right. As far as I'm come, there might be a better way to skin a cat, but that's the way that I found works best for me.
I actually think that makes a lot of sense, because you could take your stop, or not your stop, I'm sorry, the parting bead out of the channel, but that would you might split it. I mean, it would just be another kind of nightmare.
Yeah, a lot of times the blind stop is rabbited into the jamb itself. And so if you try and remove that, like you have to pull the exterior casing off, and then you pull the blind stop off, and it's not a movable piece. No. So just putting that on that's a great idea. Just putting it on the sash, and you could just do it the same width as that.
so you never even see it.
Yeah, so it's hidden back behind there. So
Yeah.
you can put it on the sash or on the blind stop either way, but you have to go either the whole length of the sash
Right.
or the whole length of the blind stop.
Right. Excellent. That's really okay. That's good. So my brain's just working here now. I haven't had a lot of those problems, but I'm like, that's such a smart solution. I'm so glad you're here, Scott.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here. The bottom sash is easier to deal with if it's too thin. You just can adjust your interior stops wherever you need to get them tight.
Exactly.
But the top sash has a unique challenge.
Right. All right. So another question. Can we just run this category so you can just unlock pro level?
Yes.
This question, I didn't know anything about this. In fact, I don't even know if the terms are right. But I thought, you know what? I'm just going to throw it out to Scott because he's a pro. He knows what he's doing. The question was, I'd like to hear about fenestration windows and how to restore. Is that a thing? Like I tried to Google stuff and I could not figure out anything.
So my best guess is, fenestration is just a general term for windows.
Yeah, right. Or openings or whatever. Yeah,
openings. Yeah, exactly. And so my guess would be maybe they're talking about fenestra windows, which are steel windows.
Okay.
So we could be totally off on this, but I can answer that about fenestra windows.
Yeah, let's do fenestra because that could be it too. It could have been either a typo on my part or an autocorrect weird thing.
Autocorrect. That was my guess because autocorrect fixes fenestra to fenestration on my phone all the time. I bet
that's what happened because fenestra makes a lot of sense because some people have asked me about metal windows. So yeah, go for it. Let's do fenestra instead.
Fenestra is just a steel window manufacturer from back in the day. They made a ton of residential windows and commercial windows too. And I've got some blog posts on it. It's a very similar process to wood windows. I don't recommend that homeowners pull out the movable sashes on steel windows.
Okay.
We do it. We have a method to do it, but it's fairly complicated. You have to cut rivets and then you have to put new security bolts in and things. And if you can do it on site, it's usually better to do it that way. But it's the same kind of process on steel windows. Cut them free, remove the old glazing putty. You will break most of the glass if you're doing steel windows. The putty is thicker and harder than on wood windows, and it's very hard to get out. So just kind of assume that you're going to have a lot of replacement glass if you're doing that. You don't have to take all the putty out, but you can do what you want with it, and then put in new putty. Treat the rust with something called OSPHO, which is a acid chemical that helps convert rust to a paintable surface. And it's, prime it with a good metal paint. Sherwin-Williams makes a really good primer called Chem Chromic, which is a rust inhibiting primer, and then paint them with a good direct to metal or some other kind of paint. There's a lot of variety. Once you've primed it properly, you can really paint them with whatever you want. And it's just about making sure that they're not sticking closed and operating. But steel windows, when they're cleaned up and they're closed and latched properly, they're really extremely energy efficient because they have all these channels that they really close in there. There's no just wood sliding against wood. It's right. All very, very draft proof.
So you mentioned that the putty is really different. Can you still just go back and use regular Sarco or Austin's, or is there a special type of putty that the fenestra window needs?
Sarco recommends dual glaze for their steel windows, and the Austin's Glazer's putty does work on it. The dual glaze stays flexible longer, but it does take a couple weeks, depending on the weather, to be able to paint. The Austin's Glazer's putty is paintable in about 3 or 4 days if it's warm enough. If it's below 50, you're going to wait a long time for your putty to cure. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, you're about to unlock this pro level.
Okay.
All right. The last question in this category is, any tips for putting in a Dutchman repair on a cracked window jamb? And why don't you start with telling us what, I know what a Dutchman repair is, but just because that's a term that comes up a lot in windows. So just generally, what is a Dutchman? And then the answer to this question.
Well, I'll start with a funny story. I had, there is a guy that I am an acquaintance of mine that is actually a Dutch carpenter. And I was showing him, I was like, what do you call, I did a Dutchman and I sent him a picture. I was like, what do you call this kind of repair? He goes, a repair. And I went, aha. I was like, that's because you're Dutch. It's just a repair.
Right.
And I said, we in America call that a Dutchman. He goes, why? And I said, I don't know. I was hoping you would have an answer to it. So he didn't have an answer to it. I've heard that they're called Dutchmen because the Dutch were very resourceful and didn't want to waste anything.
Okay.
So rather than replacing it, they would simply repair the portion that was damaged. So that makes the most sense. But
that's funny.
Dutchmans are they're so varied. I mean, it just depends whether it's just a little chip out or you're rebuilding a whole portion of the jamb. They're very tough they can be tough to do, especially on a jamb where you don't have access all around. I kind of do the best that you can with what you have. My advice would be to, if you're tying it into an existing jam or something, would be to use a scarf joint, which is a joint that it's basically like the two pieces are joined at an extreme angle, like a 60 degree or at least a 45 degree angle, so that the water is able to shed out, and it should be at an angle where if the jam gets wet, it can shed the water out. If you do just a butt joint, which is, you've just cut it flush and then you butt it up against it, it doesn't join as well to the wood. And you have more joining surface area to glue or screw or attach your Dutchman. So using those kind of scarf joints is helpful. And it's, my Dutchmans are usually a combination of carpentry and a little bit of epoxy to kind of fill the gaps. If you don't get it perfect, you can use some epoxy, but it's never on a frame where you can't get to all sides. It's never going to be quite as strong, I don't think, as a solid repair where you have access all the way around. So do what you can.
Good news. You have unlocked the pro level achievement.
Yes.
We still have a few more questions in WWSD.
Okay, let's do that.
Then we can move to the lightning round.
Let's finish off what would Scott do.
Okay.
And go to the lightning round.
All right. Here we go. Next question in WWSD is, any experience with noise canceling glass in historic windows? Is it worth it?
Well, it depends how sensitive to noise you are. So noise canceling glass would be laminated glass. That's the best glass for noise blocking potential. It is tough. The smallest size, thinnest size you can get is 1/4 inch. And most windows or the sash will have to be modified to accommodate that. So it's not, I don't like to do that. It works great in steel windows. You can fit 1/4 inch laminated glass in there, no problem. But on wood windows, you have to like route out the wood glazing rabbet and make it deeper. So I tend to stay away from it and rather would say that you go with good weather stripping, and that will help block a lot of the noise coming through.
Yeah, maybe even those interior storms would help too.
Interior storms, exterior storms, anything that you want to put up there, it's about, you put an extra layer there, or you stop the draftiness, because the noise, a lot of it travels in, other than very low frequency, travels in on the air. So, we were just doing some windows with the integrated metal weather stripping, and it's amazing how quiet things are when that is closed up, because there's very little air coming in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just did an episode with Ashley Goldman. It will come out before this one, and she lives in a flight path, and she has not used noise canceling. But it reminded me of her house in San Diego, which is right under a flight path, and I thought, I bet it's not her question, but I bet it's where one of those questions originated.
Yeah.
All right, WWSD. It's when do you, we already addressed this one. When do you replace a window instead of restoring it? And that was that rule of 1/3, I guess, basically.
Neil Moser, who's a friend of mine, says a lot of times when people say, well, this one is beyond repair, his response is, no, it's ready for repair.
Yeah. It's funny, when I read that question too, I read it as, how do you know when to replace a window instead of restoring it? And all I could think of was, like, I guess most people's minds would go to replacing it with a vinyl, but my head just went to like, when do I rebuild it in a new sash? That's where my head went when I read that question. But you're right. Replacing it with vinyl, never.
Never.
All right. Next question on WWSD is, how much can Abitron save versus sending to a pro? And my guess on this question is they mean, how much Abitron can you use in one spot before it's all Abitron, I guess.
If you had it in your budget, it's like you could really build a window sash out of Abitron. I know that that's not what they recommend it for,
right.
But it's an extraordinary product, and you can. I've done a lot of very large rebuilds. There's a post on my blog about how to use, one of the first ones I did about Abitron, and it was on a column base. So It's not window related, but I think I used 2 gallons of the stuff, because it was this huge commercial, like big Doric columns. And I was like, I don't have a way to rebuild this. It's massive. I would have to pull everything out. They tried to fill it with spray foam. And I was like, no, I'm just going to use Abitron, and made this nice rounded column base from 2 gallons of Abitron. I mean, that's $200 or so worth of Abitron, but It was easier for me than trying to build a 12-inch tall column base and then support everything. So Abitron epoxies are a lifesaver for me.
Yeah, it really is a remarkable product, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the last WWSD is, what is the best way to replace a missing muntin?
Oh, man. Well, here you go. Here's the best way. If you are, it takes a lot to set up a wood shop unless you already have one with the right routers and everything like that. The best way is go to a salvage yard in your area and go get a salvaged sash, take it apart, take the mutton out, and use that mutton on your sash that you want.
Beautiful.
It's already been made. Clean it up, put it in there. You'll have minor modifications, but to try and match that profile, it's too hard to call somebody and say, can you make this for me, and then ship it to me and make sure it's the right thing. Just go find something locally.
Yeah, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. And when you take that salvage window apart, you'll know how yours goes apart so that you can put your replacement mutton back in.
Exactly. And there's a lot of regional differences. So if you go to your regional salvage yard, they'll probably have some sash that are similar to what's on your house.
Excellent. So you have just completed round 2.
Woo, all right.
How you feeling? Are you tired? Do you need a break?
I'm exhausted. Yeah. I need some water. I'm going to be ready for this. I just got to prepare for the lightning round.
The purpose of the lightning round is, I figured, rather than sort of in-depth responses. Of course, if you feel like it needs more, we'll go there. But I kind of figured these could be just quickies, and that we could do more research. If somebody had the answer, then they could move on from this podcast and look into it a little bit more. The lightning round. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Question number 1. Why does the top portion of my window drop down when I lift the bottom portion?
Because your weight ropes are too long, more than likely.
Okay. Next question. What's your favorite weather stripping to use? Is bronze stripping the best?
Spring bronze is my favorite, but interlocking metal is the most efficient.
Okay. Next question. Any referrals for a good window restoration person near Washington, D.C.?
Yes, Moser Window Works.
Okay.
Or Heritage Restoration in Rhode Island.
Excellent. How do you keep your windows from sticking when you paint the entire sash? Is it the curing time?
It is the curing time, and I use using an enamel paint is helpful as well.
Enamel paint. Okay. How do you remove the stops if they aren't screwed in?
You pry them off. You cut the paint line between the stop and the casing, and you pry it off using a trim pry bar.
Best wood for making storm windows if you cannot get Akoya?
Anything rot resistant.
Okay. In
your area. Lots of regional differences.
All right.
That's a cop-out. Let me actually give some samples of stuff.
All right, go for it.
So in the Northeast, eastern white pine. In the South, cypress, Spanish cedar, mahogany. There's a few good ones. White oak.
You were holding out on us. You had all of that up there.
It really depends where you live. You know, it's like, I can't use white oak here. It rots immediately, but it works good in New England. So
Sure. Okay.
Find what works in your area because it's all local.
All right. Best way to remove paint from textured glass?
Soak it in water. Use a stiff bristle brush. If that doesn't work, put some liquid paint stripper on it and use that same stiff bristle brush to get it off.
All right.
Not a metal brush.
Oh, not a metal
Nylon
brush.
Stiff bristle. Yes.
Okay. And last question, why does Scott smell so good? You submitted this question.
I saw your questions. I was like, I'll put something fun in here. I was like, I don't know, because he showers regularly.
I was going to say, it's worth noting that I can't smell you. This is a podcast, so this is not like a weirdo question that I'm asking you.
Maybe podcasts in like 2030, you'll be able to have that. You know, it'll be even more realistic. We'll have smell added to these types of things. So excellent job. You have completed the lightning round. You have unlocked the pro level. We now know what WWSD. What would Scott do? I would make bracelets if it wasn't so egotistical to make those. So I was like, I'll steer clear of it, but I think it was fun.
You could put them in your shop, yeah, and we'd all be like wearing our WWSD bracelets. What would Scott do? And then everyone would say, "What does that mean?" And we'd say, "Oh, it's just a restoration thing. It's just something that we talk about."
This is not popular in the 90s at all.
Right. All right. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I wasn't going to ask you all these questions, but when I looked at them, they were all different. Like I said, I can't believe it, but I got almost 50 questions to ask you.
I particularly enjoyed the lightning round. That was a blast. It was like getting through these that quickly.
Good.
It helps me not mumble and babble on.
Well, same here. Like I said before, your points don't matter. So I am going to draw a name from someone who submitted a question, and I'm going to send them a mug. And I would happily send you one too if you want it.
I would love one. And let me know, you can do, if you would like to, you can do another drawing and I'll send that another person I Restore shirt.
Oh, that would be great.
They just have to tell us what size they want.
Perfect. Thank you for offering up that also.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you get back to work. I feel like you've answered all these questions. You've done a great job. And as always, it's really fun to have you here. And I appreciate it so much.
Always a blast. Thanks, Stacy.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. You will find everything you need to know about this episode, including links and transcripts, over on the website truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
Bye for now.
What do you think everybody should do now?
Go wash your hands.
Agree.